r/AskReddit. People who have been homeless. What was the first night without a home like? And how did you adapt to your new situation? I was 13 when my parents kicked me out and told me they no longer wanted anything to do with me. I was terrified to visit a shelter because I'd known some foster kids and the whole system scared me, plus I wanted to continue going to the same school and didn't want to lose my friends too. The scariest part at that age was really finding out what I was hoping to eat. There had been a dilapidated trailer just minutes down the road from my dad's place, so I stayed in that. I don't think it all really hit me until I had to choose one night between food and blankets because the temperature was expected to drop down to the mid-30s and I had only had one somewhat thin blanket at that point. The next day, I put on my best attire, which was nothing impressive, and asked for a job at Long John Silver's. I lied and told them I was 15 and I worked 5 days a week rushing over after school. I ate more unhealthy than I have since to save money for some form of shelter, which came in the form of a 91 Toyota Camry that I purchased out of the thrifty nickel for $300. I loved that clunker, plus heating myself was much easier. From there it was mostly uphill. Found an older lady willing to rent me her garage without any sort of credit check. Took a couch off the side of the road to sleep on. I even had internet in there where I mostly read scary stories all night. I wish video streaming services were really a thing back then, and I just kinda learned to roll with the punches. My childhood wasn't normal. It was downright terrifying a good chunk of the time, but it is what made me who I am today. I was about 9 years old, and my mom said we were going on a camping trip. I didn't really suspect anything, as it was summertime and we went camping a lot when I was younger, although I did wonder why we were packing so much stuff. After a few weeks of camping, I started to complain, but my mom kept insisting that it was good for us to get in touch with nature, etc. Then school started, and we were still camping, and we kept camping for another 6 months. When we finally got a house, my mom cried with joy, and we don't camp anymore. To me, that reads as your mother trying to protect you as best she could and keep things positive for you, staying strong in the face of terrible circumstances. Good on her. I remember being really hungry and acting weird because of the low blood sugar, almost delirious. This was when I made a futile attempt to run away from an abusive home with no money. I ended up going back because of that. I was homeless for a couple of months a year or two ago. I had a car and a low paying job, so I lived in the woods in a tent for a bit. The first night was miserable. I ended up sleeping really uncomfortably in the passenger seat of my car and it was a really cold night. After that I got a tent and slept on an old climbing pad I had. The first night was hell, but the next several weeks were actually not so bad. I had a spot in the woods where I was well hidden and would cook over a fire. I really didn't have it that bad, but it gave me quite a bit of sympathy for people who really do end up on the streets in a much more desperate situation. Shit is not easy. Sleeping in my car wasn't that bad. It was summer, so it was pretty warm, which was my biggest issue. Showered in the gym, and spent most of my day at the library before going to work. For the first few nights it wasn't bad. However, one night police found me sleeping in my car and escorted me to the local homeless shelter, which was one of the most terrifying nights of my life, since I'm lying there in a top bunk when a huge argument breaks out because one guy breaks out some meth, wouldn't share it with a second. Then a third got pissed and started screaming at them to be quiet because he needed to sleep. Edit. Since this is coming up a lot, people keep asking how it was legal that the police escorted me to the shelter. I don't know the legality of the issue. What I can say is that I was woken up by a knock on my window to see 4 cops. 2 cop cars. They were singing those super bright flashlights through my window at me, and I didn't even think of arguing with them. When you're a teenager, it seems kind of cool to sleep in the car, on the couch or floor of a friend or acquaintance, or for your dad to scam a rented apartment for a month or 2 without paying for it. Moving around every few months carrying everything that you can in an old Honda Civic seems like an adventure. We once moved a couch across town in it. We must have looked like a couple of idiots. Once, after a few months of staying in a place where we had no furniture, were sleeping on the floor, the carpet of which was so flea infested that you could literally see the fleas hopping around. The landlord got so frustrated with us basically squatting in his property. My dad promised to pay and never did. that he removed the front door. So we went out to scam some food from somewhere and came back to find no front door. Which in retrospect is a pretty awesome way to get someone out of your property. One of the ways we scammed food would be to go to the breakfast buffet of a fancy hotel, tell the server that we had a room there, eat a ton of food and just walk out. This was also kind of fun, but looking back it is a kind of ducked up way for a dad to treat his teenage kid. I was kicked out by my mother at 16 and spent 2 months homeless before the local authority placed me in foster care. I think what hit me first was how my own mother could make one of her own children homeless. I felt like the least favorite of her children. It all came out of nowhere. I racked my brain for years after, trying to think of what I might have done in particular. Also the crippling loneliness you feel when you are trying to get hold of people to ask for a place to sleep for the night. I could not feel more alone in the world when someone would either not answer my message or tell me they were busy. I'm pretty sure I camped out in the park that night. Didn't sleep at all. It was terrifying and cold and hungry. I didn't sleep a wink. I adapted over time. Extremely steep learning curve to surviving homelessness. Nothing really prepares you for it. Must have been awful. I can't imagine being in such a position. I would have no idea where to go or what to do. I hope things are better for you. Slept in my vehicle. Couch surfed with a friend. Squatted in an unused trailer. All while still working at a Walmart. Saved enough to get a crappy apartment and just kept going from there. First night my wife and I landed up sleeping outside. We slept in a local park that I knew. We had come down from the countryside with a few rands, enough for one meal maybe, and had hoped to stay with a friend. He was unable to give us a place to stay, so we had to sleep outside. After the insecurity of that first night, I told my wife that we have to find a safer place to sleep. So we climbed up the slopes of Table Mountain, about a 1-hour walk, and found quite a obscured spot amongst some bushes and trees. We cleared it out of sticks and rocks, made it a bit habitable, and then went make to the city looking for work. We'd spend the day going from one place to the next looking for work until it started growing dark. Then we'd head up the mountain to our little spot for the night. Did that daily for a month until we were able to secure a small shack room in the townships, where we stayed for another few months until I get a job offer. Was my wife's temp waitering jobs that kept us fed whilst I was looking for work. Biggest challenge was mental. Keeping focused, clean, looking presentable, and just making my job looking for a job. I kept waking up in the middle of the night and would start walking home. I'd get a few steps, then stop and realize I had nowhere to go and turn and walk back over and lay on the ground. The ground is very cold and I felt a lot of shame. When I was a teenager I had lots of problems with my mom. I pretty much chose to be homeless. I slept at a Catholic church across from my high school so I could still make it to school and graduate early. I remember feeling really sad because I slept where they put people's ashes. And I remember being so sad that those people could comfort me in death more than anybody alive. I used to talk to them. If there's camera footage I'll look insane. I never realized how alone I was in the world until I was homeless. And I never realized how cold concrete can be. It chills you right to your bones and is painful. I started being homeless at 19. A previous foster parent put me out for coming home from college one night, and I had called up a friend last minute. When I started to realize I wouldn't be able to crash or stay anywhere, I am fairly certain I started to dread and spiral into a constant, underlying depressive state. All I could think about was, am I going to die like this? Do I matter? Will no one help me? I'm sad. I'm scared. I don't want to feel like I have to beg. What if I'm stuck like this? Is this really my life right now? 1926 was a very challenging time. Edit. I am stunned, taken aback, and truly appreciate the feedback and support that's been granted to me this day, and will continue to respond. But I am not used to so much verbal traffic to peruse. Nevertheless, I will make an Ask Me Anything upon several Redditors' suggestions, as a lot of this can be encapsulated in so many words, and I want to help by way of sharing. Thank you all again, and I am still doing my very best, better or worse to this day. I simply have no intention on going backwards. Happy face with hugging hands. I was getting high, so it really didn't truly sink in until I was broke and dope sick. Then the desperation started. Going to gas stations, jumping car to car asking for money, stealing what I had to. It was a miserable existence. There are so many things you don't think about when you're not homeless. Taking a shower, washing your clothes, and the boredom. Hours upon hours of nothing to do, and the constant noise. There was nowhere to go where it was truly quiet. Fortunately, I eventually got arrested for shoplifting, reached out to family who helped me get back on my feet. Glad to hear you're back on your feet, bro. I once was fooled by an ex into moving back in with her after a breakup. After a couple of weeks she decided to have a yard sale. This yard sale ended up featuring most of my stuff. Then with money in hand she decided it was time I went back to my place. My place which had nothing in it. My place which I had given notice on. My place which was already awaiting a new renter. I spent my last 2 weeks sleeping on a hardwood floor using sweaters as blankets, and then when the day came to vacate I threw all my clothes in a plastic bag and just started walking. I was destitute. I had absolutely nothing and no idea where to start. It was right in the Canadian winter, so staying outside would be a death sentence in many cases. So I did the only thing I could think of. I sat in a 24-hour Tim Hortons. I used what little money I had to purchase small coffees once in a while, so I at least had an excuse to sit there. Eventually my cash ran out and I thought for sure I'd get the boot. Then one of the ladies working the counter came over and just handed me my usual order. I guess she probably figured out what was going on and felt bad. The second time she did it I struggled not to cry. I'm pretty thankful because my next idea if I was asked to leave was to politely refuse, then sit and wait for the cops. Better than freezing to death. Morning came and I had saved only enough to catch a single bus. Headed downtown to try to find some friends. I did, and I couch surfed between a lot of them. I never spent a night out in the cold, but I spent many in a coffee shop or bouncing between friends. It was the worst my depression ever got and the closest I ever came to actually ending my life. Things are a million times better for me now, but I'll never forget how worthless I felt. Ducking, like and subscribe.